All right, welcome. So this is the tough questions on business agility. Now we have a number of questions that people did put in earlier on, but we've also got an empty chair here, and we're going to do a bit of a fishbowl as well. So if at any point you want to raise additional questions, or you've got a pressing thing that you'd like to get in the conversation, come and grab that empty chair. So we'll start, and these are the questions that were on the board outside. We'll start with this one. How can we motivate ourselves when we take ownership of failure? So who wants to tackle that? Rita. Okay.
Is it turned on?
Don't must to be scared because I said it also. The biggest mistake you can make is don't be scared for making mistakes.
So don't be afraid of making mistakes. Just
Yes.
be courageous. And if she can come here in front of all of you, what's holding you back? Would anyone else in the panel like to?
So when we train our, people on certain aspects of mindset and behavior, so one of the things we look at is psychological safety, right? So that's a core focus these days, and we've seen that makes a lot of difference to the teams because they kind of feel it's a safe environment. They are okay to open up. They're not scared to hold back things, and they're very much okay to make mistakes. So that's one aspect we kind of drill down into the teams when we start training them, even for new teams, existing teams. So that makes a lot of difference. That's one thing we've seen as a pattern.
Actually, can I request the panel to just quickly introduce themselves? I'm not sure if everyone's aware.
Probably a good idea.
Sorry, I didn't
Just a quick round of introduction, like if we can just go around and then.
Okay, I'm Henrik from Ericsson.
I am Jorgen Hesselberg from Comparative Agility.
I'm Shane Hasty from IC Agile.
I'm Gekke.
I'm Yves Hanoul from Belgium.
My name is Marina. I'm from Moscow. I'm Agile sales expert.
This is Sandhya from HCL, Bangalore.
So now I need to remember what I wanted to say about it. No, it's very much about safe environments. And the thing is really a safe environment is an experience. And the big question for me always is how do we create this experience? You say we need to dare, but when we dare, there needs to also be an environment that lets us dare, that is forgiving. And that's where I think it very much starts with the leaders again in the companies, that they create this environment where when you dare and when you fail, they are not blaming you for failing, but actually appreciating that you tried. So we need a growth mindset in our companies. I think that is a very, very important aspect of this equation.
Gekke, do you remember what's the biggest mistake I did?
You burned out the house?
Yeah, I burned down my parents' house when I was 19, right?
That's a mistake.
So I learned that if you can survive that, you can survive anything. And I learned that because the reaction of my mother. My mother, what she did when she came home, she was on holiday, and she came home, and the first thing she did, it's even hard to say, the first thing she did is she hugged me. And that hug is what Henrik is talking about. It gave me the message, you failed, but you're not a failure. That's what the safe environment means. It's okay to fail. It's even okay to burn down a house because you're okay and we're okay. And that's the message. It's okay to fail. It's okay to do whatever hard thing. And I remind me every time I think about, will I try something? It can fail. I can be, but okay, it's okay to fail because that doesn't make me a failure. He said that so Keke knows what to do when you're 19. So I'll explain later at the bar if you want to hear more.
Okay, we had a number of questions that tackled the vexing issue of performance management and salaries and bonuses. How does that change when the organization is taking an agile mindset? And how do we bring that change through?
I can say a few words about it. I mean, at the end of the day, the way we reward, the way we punish, the way we incent people drives behavior, which drives norms, which ultimately forms the culture. So our performance schemes need to change also if we're looking to change as an organization. If you think about what we're trying to encourage, it's collaboration. It's an idea of an end-to-end view of the customer value stream. So have metrics that support that. One of the things that I've seen be very successful is look at metrics that you can't really succeed with on your own. So for you to be successful, you need your fellow brothers and sisters to also succeed, so that if one fails, we all fail. But on the other hand, if we all succeed, we all gain from this. Lead time is a great metric in that sense. And we're not just looking at lead time as a static thing. We're looking at a trend. We're looking at improvements. For that lead time to improve, everyone needs to do their part. It's not enough that one person does awesome. It's not enough to optimize locally. You have to all help with that. So it's those kind of metrics that I think can really help create an organization that has a more holistic view of agility and performance.
I have another example. I think Doc talked about earlier today about asking the team, instead of asking a manager, asking a team. So what we did at a certain company is we created a kind of, so a lot of questions for different roles. We said for a Scrum Master, you need to do this or that. So we came up with some questions. And then we asked the teams to do a kind of planning poker. We created special cards from 10 to 5, I think. I don't remember exactly anymore. But we asked people to vote on each other at the same time. Same rules for planning poker. You first hide them and then you all show them. And you actually had to vote on yourself as well, which is extremely scary. Because now you have to say, hey, I think I'm a 10. And then maybe your whole teammates, they just say, oh, well, sorry, we think you're a 5, which is actually something that happened in a team that I was coaching. So that is very scary, but it's very great feedback, but not just the numbers, because of course then people have to explain why they give you a 5 or a 10 or whatever. And it's very scary, but you learn a lot, and a lot more than if a manager would tell you, because a lot of times when a manager tells people something, they like, yeah, but it's a manager and blah, blah, blah. But if your teammate, with the person with who you're working on a day-to-day basis says, I really love that you do this, you don't always realize. Because how many times do we take the time to tell to a coworker and say, I really like what you do there. You saved the sprint, or you saved and you do this. And so we ask teams to do that once a year to score each other. We were actually thinking, I left that company, but we were actually thinking about doing that multiple times a year to actually help people to do that. The big thing is that the same question we did, and I found that very important, the same question we asked in a round. So first we would score me, and then so everybody would score me, and then we go to the next person and we score the same question. If that's the same role, we would score the same thing, so that we can actually kind of collaborate a little bit. And the first 2 questions were really kind of easy to get to know the process and everything, and then we continue with the harder things. Typically, it takes multiple sessions of 3-4 hours. So that takes a long time, because we took about, I think, 12 to 15 questions. It takes a long time. You're exhausted after such a session, but it creates a lot of energy.
Just adding to that, we had a system in our organization which was a more 360-degree feedback. It was not really, getting a feedback from just your manager. So I remember this system, and in fact, we don't use it now. But then it was very effective in terms of getting feedback from your peers, from your team members, a few others in the organization. And I remember our CEO at that point in time, who was Vineet. In fact, he used to publish his own, feedback. What's the kind of feedback he's got? It used to be very transparent, and the concept of 360, and it's a wonderful concept. I think we need to really explore that, as an industry practice and also in organizations. Yeah,
And another side, when our employees give feedback to our executive, and we use it in a retrospective, and when our executive team have demonstration, and all employees could give them feedback. And this is our tool.
I think there was also a component about salaries and so on, and that is another maybe very interesting topic, because you can make this a very unsafe transition when you start now threatening people with, now we are going to cut salaries and so on. And the thing that really helped me was a bit like, fair doesn't mean equal. Yeah. Yeah. So fair doesn't mean equal, means, okay, maybe there are people who have more contribution to the company, and you need to find an agile way how to identify these people. And that is actually a multi-year transition when you have an established company with a certain culture. And I have the experience that it very much depends on in which country you are. So our company is an internationally operating company, and these things are handled different in China, in India, in Germany, in France, or in Italy. So you need to be also culturally aware of this one. So it is not this simple one-size-fits-all approach to this one, unfortunately. Yeah.
A complex problem, who would have thought? Please.
Thanks. Yeah. So when I think about business agility, I always think at two levels. One is the customer's business being agile, and which is really, really dynamic and all of that. For our customer, if our customer business is really dynamic and agile, we as a product development company or whatever have to be agile, and our business need to be agile. This is two layers or two different levels that I always look at. But the biggest challenge to achieve this business agility, as I understand, is we are always focusing on only the process part of it. Let's say if we do daily stand-ups, retrospective, and all of that so-called ceremonies, or the Kanban way of managing the work and all of that, you follow Scrum, Kanban, XP, all of these are only the process part of it. But we have lost the core engineering aspects or the architectural aspects that we need to really take care. For example, if there is a monolithic architecture which doesn't allow you to do any kind of agility, for example, let's say a build takes 2 to 4 days. It is a real case basically, right, from my previous experience. A product build takes 2 to 4 days to even get through. So how can you be really agile, right? So business agility, we keep talking, but how can it be really achieved when you have this biggest challenge of your architecture? Maybe are the companies really ready today to take that tough decisions of, I will just completely break the architecture that I have today. I'm going to build a new product which is going to still serve the customer value, but with the microservices based architecture, or something totally different, right? Something totally new. So this is my pressing question, and my thoughts on business agility dimensions.
Who would like to tackle that first?
I can start. I mean, I think this is obviously a complex question, and there's not one answer to this, but there's one thing that you said I think was pretty important, is that this is not a process question. This is an organizational question, and it's a business decision ultimately. You know, what kind of company do we want to be? What do we want to optimize for? Having a monolithic architecture is going to optimize for certain things. It might be quick and fast for certain very specific things, but it doesn't make you very adaptable. So if you want to make sure you're more flexible, that means that there's a cost to that. Agile isn't free. That's one thing I think people don't recognize, that there is a cost and benefit to this. So if you then think about the technology piece, which is a lot of the things you talked about now, structures, infrastructures, tools, all those kind of things, that also needs to be supported by an organizational design, by leadership, by people, and the culture that goes with that. And these changes need to help each other. You cannot have a culture of adaptability rhythm analytic design, just like you said. These things need to support each other. So that's why this is a type of change that needs to happen over time and at the very senior levels. It's not just a technical decision. It's a pure business decision, but it isn't free.
And that links nicely to one of the hard questions, which was how to get them to be agile, them being marketing, info, legal, various other areas of the business that are not IT. Because, yeah, IT agile, we've solved. But that bigger agility question, so tackling the organization design questions, tackling the hard shifts. A personal perspective on that is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Thin slices, constant steady change, build in feedback mechanisms, learn, adapt, and be prepared to be wrong. There will be lots of mistakes made along the way.
You're so right, because in my space, in my work, the way we hire these days is not to just look at CV and bio alone. What we do is we want to know what is the potential of the person to learn. So according to the World Economic Forum, the most important skill that you need to hire anybody is learnability. Can that person learn? Because we do not know what the job description is going to be in a couple of years. We do not know what the job titles are going to be. But can that person learn fast? Can that person have the potential to learn? That's what we look for. And there are a whole lot of questionnaire and interview sessions, et cetera, we gauge the person to employ that person. And we also cultivate a culture in our company where we say, it's okay to say, I don't know. It is okay to say that. Go ask somebody, learn it as quickly as you can. So sometimes it is very hard for people to say, I don't know, because they're scared, ta-da-da. But we cultivate that culture saying, go say I don't know, but learn it as quickly as you can.
It is a very good question how to sell Agile to another departments, right? Sales, marketing. First step, it's explain what they will get if they apply Agile mindset. Because in business now we have a situation when everybody thinks that Agile is just for IT. Because IT don't invite in other departments for their demonstration. They don't explain what they're doing. And salespeople think that you just put stickers on your wall and nothing more. And for them it's strange. The second thing, it's to sell executive, like head of sales department, head of marketing, and show them that they will increase in sales and in marketing. For example, in my case, we usually start Agile transformation from sales. We have pilot team, we triple our sales, and then we go to executive and explain, like, look, this is Agile mindset. Would you like to try? And after that, yes?
Sorry. So the question about how do we get them to understand, and that's probably something that all of us do, and somewhere that is where we get stuck. There's a concept called extreme ownership. If you have not heard of it, extreme ownership, the authors are Joko Willink and Lee F. Babin. There are 12, you can call them principles, that can lead to extreme ownership. And one of them is, what can you do in order to make something happen? So you have leaders and you have people at the workforce. And your management or your leadership decisions can be pushed at as lowermost position as possible. And if there is something that your leader is struggling in order to achieve, what is it that you can do in order to help them achieve it? So you can always question how to get them understand, but what is it that you are doing to even help them get there? That's a different question.
That's pretty much what I was going to say. This has been my, as I think for those of you who saw my presentation, this has kind of become my job now. And it's a big challenge. And one of the things which I think is really crucial, like you said, is you have to be of service and you have to speak the language of the people you're trying to solve. Speaking the language is very hard. I think this community, which I've been involved in some sense for about 15 years, while talking about exploration and not knowing and doing experiments, actually has a lot of arrogance. It comes across as very arrogant of knowing the right way to do things and having prescribed frameworks and know you're doing it wrong. In fact, it's one of the most arrogant sort of communities that I've interacted with, to be perfectly frank. Not the individuals per se, but a lot of the thoughts that come out, a lot of the ways that people are talk about it, very prescriptive. And when you're coming from outside someone else's reality, you have to drop all that stuff or it'll never be effective. So I think it's around saying, okay, this stuff has worked for us within software. Here are some of the general principles we think are effective, and helping somebody else to translate that into a similar benefit that they get, which is not going to involve the same processes. It won't use the same vocabulary. And I think we should try to intentionally avoid doing those things so we don't come across as that sort of guru who's trying to tell you that they're smarter than you are, which I found the hard way many times in life does not work at all.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of add to that a little bit. There's a few themes that were kind of coming through that I just wanted to add to. I think the assumption that we technologists have got Agile nailed, I think, is not even close to accurate. And I think that the idea that we are doing that perfectly is mistaken. We don't tend to see the end-to-end value of these things appropriately. Agile thinking is all about going the impact in the outcome. It's about the value that we're delivering to the organisations in which we're operating and working. I think that's important to take that into consideration. I think that when you're trying to communicate the sorts of ideas, the sorts of lessons that we are in the process of learning to different groups of people, you need to communicate in different ways. If you're talking to technologists, then talking about engineering and measurable outcomes and those sorts of things is important. I think if you're talking to more commercial people in an organisation, then talking about the value, the business value of the things that we're delivering and the commercial impact. I'm a technologist. I'm a nerd. I tend to try and get to be data-driven in decision-making. And so, but I'm also a consultant. I spend quite a lot of time talking to people in my client organizations who are not part of the technology community. And the kinds of conversations that we have are different. So we're talking about the bottom line advantage of some of these practices. And the thing that we should know when we're having those conversations is we should have that stuff at our fingertips. We should be looking at things like the State of DevOps report and understanding that organizations that practice certain disciplines make more money than organizations that don't. Those are compelling arguments to people that are in the other part of the organization. And the last part is that there shouldn't be a them and us. If we look at world-class organizations that are good at this stuff, there is no big distinction between the people that are thinking in business terms and the technologists. The boundaries are very, very blurred, and I think that should be something that we're striving to achieve.
Generally, I think wronging people is always a bad idea. And in that sense, the thing is, I've seen that there are all these surveys, they are all pointing to the same thing since, I don't know how many years do we have the State of Agile surveys and so on, and all these statistics are radiated, and they just don't get it. And already when we say they don't get it, there is a we and them, and we are confrontative in this thing. So what worked for me much, much better is when we say, okay, now our product creation has moved into agile, into an agile approach, that we say, oh, now we are seeing another obstacle, and actually the people who can help us overcoming that obstacle are, for example, in the finance department or in the HR department. And then we reach out to these colleagues and we say, oh, we have a problem. How can we solve this? So it needs to become a we question. And my experience is when we start sharing the problem, we start sharing the solution, and then things start moving. And you don't even have to talk about Agile or whatever. It's more like there is a concrete thing that you try to solve.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly. And one of my consultancy tactics of trying to build those kinds of bridges is always to be looking, so what can I do to help that person solve a problem that person has? Because that's a good way of building friendships and relationships that allow you to make progress and to start opening up people to thinking about things differently, perhaps.
As long as I don't have the arrogance to say, I know better than you, I'm going to help you. I had that once in a meeting that I said, okay, how can I help you? And that person really freaked out. That person didn't want my help. That person wanted to be heard. And that was an important lesson for me.
Try something contentious in there. At least one person has
I suspect. All right. Well, what about organizations that are looking at Agile and business agility as just the next trend? It's the fashionable veneer that we want. And maybe the market likes it when we say we're agile now, but we're not actually making the cultural change. How do we shift or help organizations shift in that way?
I would actually love if one of the organizations just picks it up because it's the next trend, because then that organization will cease to exist pretty quickly and that will be a better place to be. I mean, just if an organization, if the arrogance and ego do not move aside in order to understand what is it that actually you want to achieve, they're pretty much going to go bankrupt, let's say the worst possible thing, as soon as possible. And if that's going to actually add value to the market, I'll be much happier in that case.
Naresh wanted disagreement, so I'm going to disagree. But I do disagree, I'm sorry. I think that business and software development is largely a fashion thing. It's not about hard data and performance. I think that most organizations do operate on faddy thinking. I think you see that in the adoption of Agile. When I first started trying to help organizations change the way that they work professionally, which was probably the start of this century, that kind of time, working with organizations like ThoughtWorks, we would go into places and they thought we were crazy. We say, don't watch what we're doing because you won't like it, but we're going to do this crazy stuff over here, but you're going to get results. And that's the way that we worked. So if at that point, if you'd taken a survey of the industry, most of the industry would have professed to want to be doing a waterfall style of development, for example. Now, if you conducted the same survey, most of the industry would be saying that they're doing an agile style of development. Neither of those things were true. Not because waterfall worked so badly that anybody that was producing any software at all wasn't really doing waterfall because that didn't work. And now agile is mostly kind of fake agile, water scrummerful or something like that is what most organizations practice. So I think it is a faddy thing. If we want to get beyond that, I think we've got to have some kind of measuring stick. We've got to have some demonstrable mechanism to show that doing this thing works better than that thing. And until we've got that, I'm not quite sure that we can genuinely make any progress, because otherwise it's just your opinion versus my opinion, and who knows which one of us is right.
We just agreed on that. So I meant the same thing, I'm sorry. So we didn't actually disagree. So I think so what Shane mentioned what Shane mentioned is that you just take the fad and you don't really change anything. So you still continue with the same culture, we just call it something different. I think that was the question. So yeah, go out of business, that's good.
So actually I disagree by saying that agility is more about fad. in my experience, what I have noticed, it's not about fat, but many organizations are just lethargic. They just want to continue that we have been doing this, it works and it works. It's just like companies who are having good profits and they have taken a lot of liabilities and they are paying debt. They are on debt basically. And it's like debentures. They pay continuous dividends. But when it comes to when profits go down, it becomes a big issue and immediately the organization collapses. So something similar. So many of these organizations are actually lethargic in nature because they're having good times, good projects, although the cost may be high, but it's all covered because of huge profits. They are inertia. So I've actually experienced this. I actually bought in from bottom up and I introduced agility in the organization. So a couple of teams, they started noticing improvements, but from the top, the organization was very lethargic. They just did not want to adopt it. Around 8 years after I introduced, the clients themselves demanded that we want agile teams to be working on our projects because we are losing on, quick turnaround times and project features. So I disagree that many organizations consider that agility is just a fad. Actually, organizations themselves are lethargic. I'm sorry about that.
I want to ask a question to everybody. Is anybody here in logistics supply chain? Okay. Do you think Agile works in logistics supply chain? You want a disagreement, so I'm...
That's a good question. That's a really good question, and that's actually something that we struggle with a lot and continue to. So while I talked about our consumer teams in our presentation, basically, but our supply chain teams are a different story. They're much more vertically aligned. Like there's a warehouse team. There's not a cost team or an efficiency team or a scale team.
I'm really struggling with this in my world, so that's why.
I'll tell you what we've done so far. So we started, running Scrum. So I think Scrum is generally a good idea just because it's good to have boundaries by which you can introspect your process. That's a good thing. How much of the rest of it you do is kind of irrelevant. But with a supply chain, you can't really release every 2 weeks or every week. It just doesn't really work because when you're operating 26 facilities, 30 facilities in 11 cities with thousands and thousands of manpower, largely illiterate or uneducated at the very least, trying to roll out a new process is not like hitting deploy on my script and having it run. It's physical stuff we're talking about. You have to change the position of a rack. You have to train an employee on how to do something. And within that, it's quite challenging to iterate fast and to experiment fast. So what we've been doing, and it's a slow-moving process, we've picked certain facilities, dispatch centers, warehouses, sort of delivery points, and we've made them test bed facilities. So we've staffed certain kinds of people there who can roll out training very quickly. We've implemented some of the tech to be able to roll out changes quickly. A lot of that has been alignment with the operational teams. And that allows us to at least get a cycle that's maybe 3 or 4 weeks done, not like a quarter. And that's getting better. And then a lot of it is also data. So a lot of it is not necessarily doing a full rollout, but being able to analyze our data effectively so that we're just wrong less, because you just can't move it that fast. So yeah, that's what we found out so far.
I have an example where we automated a food plant, so they were creating chips and stuff like that. And before, the company was doing some agile. There was a company creating specific software for food plants every time, and it took them about 6 months to a year or 2 years to do that. And when I joined, we started working in an agile way and create stuff every 2 weeks. But like you say, at the beginning, the customers were like, yeah, every 3 months we can install something, because typically it would take them about an hour or two that they had to shut down the plant to install, to move everything. But gradually what they saw is that our software, when we would reinstall in the current version, it would take only about 15 minutes to install, to have the plant up. So they started to trust us a little more.
we had at that time about 17,000 tests that were running that we had about the software. And so at some point we had a feature that the customer really wanted and said, please install that today. He said, okay, do install that. And so I started installing. And while I was still busy doing the back office, the front office, I could see the plant, and I had a suspicion that things were going slower. So I called my colleagues and said, look, because there might be a bug, because I have the feeling that something is slowing down. And I could actually see the plant slowing down. And of course, in less than half an hour, it was really rather visible. So the CIO from that plant called the other CEO, said, you have to do that. By that time, my colleagues had found the bug. But we had 17,000 tests that run. It took about 1 hour. I know, not very agile, but still a lot of tests. So the one CEO convinced the other CEO to turn off the test so that we can run and install the new version. I see Shane's face immediately like, no, don't do that. I was saying, no, don't, there is a risk, and blah, blah, blah. But of course, one CEO talked to the other, and they killed the test, and we installed a new version. And oh, what happened? The plant stopped working, because there was, of course, another bug that was introduced. Now, the really interesting part of this story is that a few months later, I was doing a demo for another client, and he asked about the test, and the first client was there, and he said, yeah, but what if that takes a while, and blah, 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 and said, no, don't turn off this test, because it has cost me 2 million euros, just because it took an hour to solve everything. But this was interesting because this is now a customer who's convinced of unit tests and integration tests and everything, and knows the value of that, to not go too fast at some times. Yes, it would have slowed down. It would have costed them €500,000 because it would have produced less, but it has costed them a lot more. And that's the kind of clients you want in that situation.
I think that the point I was making was not about the software. Like software, we have automated tests. We release that constantly. The problem is that with dealing with supply chain, it's just a lot of, some features we'll just roll out, and we roll them out fast. But a lot of features require on-the-ground operational changes, and that makes it hard to iterate quickly, to experiment quickly. And then we don't learn that fast. We can release fairly fast, but learning tends to be a more difficult exercise. I think it's still a work in progress. If anyone else works in logistics and wants to talk to me, I would love to hear more.
Does running a conference come under logistics? Does putting a conference like this come under logistics? Putting on a conference like this come under logistics? Would you consider this as a logistics problem? A smaller scale, right? So to your question, like you were saying, is anyone experienced in putting Agile? So we get often asked, do you use Agile to run the conference? And my response is, what do you mean by that? Can speakers be considered as a hazardous material that we import from other places? Okay. So yeah, then the conference wouldn't fit into that. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it depends on how do you define Agile. If we focus just on software development, well, probably you can do some stuff around Scrum and trying to improve some processes. But if you go further, you can apply any of the frameworks that we have available, like from design thinking, if you want to improve certain things with your with all the parties on the supply chain, or anything that you can apply for innovation or anything like that. So I think that everything depends on how you define Agile.
Sure. So my name is Raj, and wanted to share a small story. I've been listening to all these great Agile stories all day long, and was having a couple of drinks with my old teammates last night, and yeah, and I used to play cricket. You know, I used to be the opening batsman of my team, and we had a system that used to work, probably illegal in most parts of the countries now, or most parts of the world, but it's called take it out to the parking lot. if somebody had a problem with somebody, we would take it out to the parking lot. And when somebody said that, we know what was up. So we'll fix our problem, we'll have a drink, and we'll hug and cry, and the problem is solved. And that approach, I guess, why it worked for us, back then, 24 years ago, is because that environment, among our teammates was a very safe environment. We all understood each other, and if one of us was in trouble, everybody, rose to the occasion and solved that problem. And we were all innocent, and there was some purity in our thoughts, and we believed in something that was greater than ourselves, and which was our common friendship and our team. So I was just trying to correlate, my flashback with all the Agile stories I've been hearing all day today, and that's something I wanted to share.
Cool. All right, this panel is getting light. Plenty of space. Any more questions? I think we'll call it a night. Naresh?